Hi everyone, welcome to our ATAR Note September lecture series. My name's Sophia and today I'm going to be taking you guys through our Year 12 Modern History lecture. If you're watching this live on the Friday that it comes out, you guys are 2 weeks away from your modern exam, which is horrifying but also really exciting because you never have to touch modern again. But a little bit about me, I'm a modern history tutor here at ATAR Notes. I graduated in 2021, so 2 years ago now, with a 96.3 ATAR, and some of my marks are on the screen. I'm studying a Bachelor of Secondary Education at the University of Sydney, so to become a high school English and Business Studies teacher. And I was going to do English and Modern because it's a really popular duo and I liked Modern. But when I saw the course, you have to study all the topics. You're studying a lot of the topics and a lot of the choices for the HSC content. And my max was at Russia. My max was at Russia in Year 12. I couldn't do anything more in uni. So that was that. And a bit about me, I'm a massive Swiftie. I feel like that's all that matters. I feel like that says enough. I've got a picture of me here. This is a primary source of me studying at 2 a.m. Not a very good example to any of you. But that's just what modern is. That's what the content demands. So the end goal for this lecture is to not feel like this anymore because kind of like a collective experience with modern is that a lot of students don't actually even hate the subjects. Like, it's not even like you don't find it interesting or you're not interested in history. It's just the amount of content, it's the memorizing, and I think it's the physical exam. I know for me, I enjoyed modern. I didn't find it boring, like some topics here and there, foreign policy. But when it came to the actual structure of the exam, that's where I struggled just because of the skills and the unpredictability of the exam. You guys know that you're going to get the 225 mark essays that can literally be on any dot point. Should be illegal. Should be illegal, but the goal is to not feel like this anymore. Um, so we'll see how we go at achieving that. Now, I want to start off by saying that this is a skills-based lecture, not a content summary, and I apologize for that because when it comes to how much content there is, a lot of our students do want those content summaries, but because of the range of topics across all of the HSC, it's really hard for us to cover everything. Russia is a really popular option, but there's others as well, and sometimes we've done Russia and then students are like, what about this topic, what about that topic? Definitely for the other two topics as well. It's only the core that the whole state is doing. So if you are not feeling too confident on the core, if you feel like really lost in it, or even if you just want a general summary of it, you can sign up for our Year 12 Head Start lecture, which is for the Year 11s going into Year 12, but you guys can still sign up. And that has a full summary of every dot point in that lecture, and you can download the slides, add those to your notes. You don't even have to watch it, even if you just want like some notes to add or just like a quick summary. I definitely recommend that. So if you are looking for content, the only content that we can properly cover is the core because it's what everyone across New South Wales is doing, and that's in our Year 12 Head Start lecture that you guys can sign up for. It's actually running at the same time, but the video will be available for the week after and the slides will be there. So if you wanted to sign up, you can. But this lecture today is purely skills based because a big kind of problem in modern, and a lot of students will end up falling to the band 5 even though they studied heaps and they feel really great with the content because they haven't actually practiced the skills. The content is great, but even if you know the syllabus and every single dot point inside out, doesn't mean you're going to get this really, really great mark because it's applying that with the skills and it's your writing. So even for your trials, you might have felt really prepared, but it's actually the essay skills, it's actually your source analysis and you're falling weak there, or you're not structuring your short answers well enough and missing out on marks there, that's bringing you down. So to help with that, we wanted to do a fully skills-based lecture, and that way it can cater for everyone across New South Wales watching this. So we're going to talk about the unspoken modern exam rules, so how to write a strong response and avoiding silly mistakes. We're going to do some source analysis, so understanding bias, and then I've also got these tables that you guys can use to kind of cheat the system, because with sources, the values and limitations of sources you can memorize. So you can memorize the values and limitations of an extract or a photograph or propaganda, and then you can just adapt that and link it to the source that you get on the day. So a lot of students don't actually practice source skills because they're like, oh, the source is going to be unseen, but you still can prepare kind of like the technique and effect that you're going to choose and then adapt that on the day. So I want to give that to you guys. We're going to go through some short answer responses, what to do, what not to do, and then there's a lot on essay writing, from the types of essays that you can write to essay samples, and then some final advice for studying as well. So we've got a lot to go through. I'm going to be live on the chat during this whole lecture, so please, if you have any questions, leave them there. I'm happy to answer anything, whether it's study advice or content. I'm happy to go through it. And there is a download. There should be a resource button somewhere on the screen. I'm not sure where, but if you press that, you can download these slides and access them. It's up to you how you want to use this lecture. I know some students like to write notes as they go. Others like to have it on in the background. Even if you have to go, it's fine. This lecture will be available for the week after, so no stress. But you can treat this lecture however you like. But we will get started just on some quick tips. Now, number one is past papers. Number one is past papers. Now, listen, if you do modern, like, very likely that you're a notes person. Like, and I was a notes person as well. With modern, there's so much content, so it's really hard to balance notes and past papers. And a lot of the time, I was putting all my effort into notes, but then I'd find that my marks were lacking because of the skills. The only way that you're going to practice your skills is with past papers, and the only way you can really do well with content is notes. So you really do need that mix. But if you haven't started past papers yet, I really recommend it. Don't think that you have to do like a full 3 hour past paper and like torture yourself straight off the bat. I physically couldn't. I didn't have the motivation. I would just, write my notes, have my Spotify on in the background, be on FaceTime, Netflix on the background, be typing up my notes from a textbook. It was a vibe. So the idea of 3 hour past papers and timed and closed books like horrified me. But getting closer to the HSC, what helped me was doing like one section at a time. Like maybe for the day, my modern study was just doing like a Russia essay and putting on the timer. And then what also helped me getting into the full past papers was, instead of just being like, okay, I'm going to start past papers, let me just put on a 3 hour time and do the whole thing. I do open book untimed and move through it. That way I could have my notes with me, and that could help me structure responses and like kind of help me revise the content as I was going. Then I did, you can do like open book timed, or and then timed closed book, and then untimed close. Like there's all the different mixes you can do, but I recommend starting with that open book untimed and then moving your way across until you get to the closed booked timed full 3 hour. It'll just help you gradually get to that full paper kind of place, and then you structure your study a lot better as well. It's also a lot less stressful and it's not as demanding on you, because you don't want to burn yourself out and drive yourself crazy in this fortnight between HSC and now. We need to stay strong. We need to stay strong. If you're struggling to start with your study, which is very, very real, gaslight yourself with documentaries, movies, and YouTube videos about the topics that you're studying. I was so heavy on this for YouTube and like movies. I would just like watch historical, just search like history, search Germany on Netflix and watch something and just consider that your study. But that's a really good way to start, and it's like light passive study, but it's still something, and something is better than nothing. And once you've watched a bit of that and had that kind of light study, then you can move more towards content. Now, in terms of content, notes 100%, flashcards and summaries are going to be your best friends. Flashcards are really good for laws, for dates especially. And in terms of your notes, it's very hard to be on top of them throughout the whole year. So if you're not finished your notes, that is so normal. That is very normal. I don't really recommend going out of your way to finish them, especially if you're really, really behind, because there's so many good notes that you guys can access online. Obviously, I'm going to say go to a10notes.com. We've got heaps of notes on there, but there's other websites as well that you guys can access notes. You can ask your friends for notes, get past notes, but they'll, having notes that are done already that you can just really quickly summarize and go through is really helpful. That's in terms of the skills part, but again, sorry, that's in terms of the content part, but again, we want to make sure we're practicing those skills, because that's what's going to push you to that band 6. So past papers, essay plans are another really good way to study. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of them, but you'll take an essay question from a past paper, and then you'll kind of map out, like you'll do intro and write out your thesis and just dot point some ideas for your introduction. Then you'll write like paragraph 1 and whatever your theme, your factor, or your event is for that paragraph. You can put in then dot points your details, what historian quote you'd use, what events you'd refer to, any statistics, anything like that, and then go to paragraph 2. So it's kind of just like the skeleton of your essay, and it can be really short, it can be really long, it's up to you. But the more essay plans that you do, the more you prepare yourself for the structure, and then you, fingers crossed, can get an essay along the same lines, and you already know how to structure that, and you already know, okay, I'm going to write about these 3 themes or these 3 factors and move on. And reading responses from past students is a really, really good idea too. You guys can access those online if you read exemplars, and we've got some samples throughout this lecture for you guys as well. But other than that, if you haven't really started, or you're still like in that starting phase, I recommend that you go through your trials and rank your sections from weakest to strongest. So maybe your weakest was Russia, then Cold War, then apartheid and core. And then that can direct your skill content study and what to work on first. So let's say you got like a 15 on Russia, you want to work on that first, and you can see by your feedback, are you lacking on the content? Did you not know enough about the dot points, or was it the way that you're structuring your essay? Or were you not incorporating enough detail? Like that's where you can see, okay, should I go and work on the content, and do I need to go back and revise over notes? Do I need to make some flashcards? Or do I need to be working on skills and practice writing essays and practice writing introductions and paragraphs, reading past ones, and possibly doing essay plans for that as well? So make sure that you use your trials to your advantage, even if it wasn't the mark that you wanted, which in a lot of cases it is. It's really important to remember that trials are significantly harder than HSC. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have put your trial marks into the ATAL calculator, but don't do it if you haven't. Don't do it. For your peace of mind, trials are a lot harder than HSC. And if you put your trial against a past HSC paper, you'll see really big differences in terms of the difficulty. I promise that HSC will feel lighter than trials did. So you'll be all good. But definitely use your trials to your advantage, because that's personalized to you. It's personalized on where you are at in each of the topics in terms of your skill and your skills and your content. So that's like personalized, it's tailored to you, and it's the best kind of study guide. It's really easy to look at what everyone else is doing and compare, like, oh, but blah blah like does one past paper a day, or blah blah is doing this. Like, forget it. It's you for the next 2 weeks. Like, you're sitting with yourself. So really just focus on what you're doing and what you need to work on, not what your friends might be doing, what you're seeing on TikTok, all of that. Now, let's get started with studying for the HSC and structuring responses, which is kind of the first part of our short answer skills. So the structure of the response for your short answers is dependent on how many marks are allocated to it, but you guys know that. So you have to always look at how many lines are given to you, and the rough guide is that if you want a band 6, you're going to fill the lines. You're going to fill all the lines there, and if you really, really, really want a band 6, like you really want that, you're going to go a little bit over, but I'm talking like 1 or 2 lines max. If you get a 3 marker and you're like writing this much under, why? It's literally 3 marks. Like, you don't have to show off or prove anything to you. When your markers are looking at your paper, they're just looking at like, hey, has this kid filled the lines? And that's already given them like an idea that you've answered the question, and they'll go through and give you the marks if you have. So don't think that you need to go overboard. I know students, and it's a myth that like if you write more, you're going to get better marks, but it's like if you fill the lines, you'll get the marks. The lines is what they expect for a band 6. So let's just keep it at that. Roughly speaking, you have about 2 minutes per mark, and it's really hard to like time that. Like, you're not going to sit there looking at your watch making sure you're doing 2 minutes per mark. But if you do follow that structure, you can kind of hit 35 to 40 minutes, which is where you want to finish the short answers. Now, you do have 45 minutes in total to complete the section, but I'm sure a lot of you guys in your trials, and I know I did as well, I finished short answers quicker, not intentionally, but it just kind of happened. And then you have more time for the essays because, like I said in the beginning, you guys know the modern paper is rough. Modern is rough. I remember I made a TikTok once. I'm not sure if you guys have seen, but I run the ATAR Notes TikTok. I've been doing it for like 6 months now. I made a TikTok once saying like modern is rough, and that it's not the like it's the exam, and everyone's like, oh, modern's easy, modern's so basic. No, it's not. No, it's not. Modern is actually really rough. It's not, the extent of content is one thing, but the actual exam and having the 225 marks worth of short answers with sources allocated like throughout them, and then the 225 mark essays all in 3 hours is wild. Is wild. In my opinion, don't cancel me. Modern is one of the hardest structured HSC exams compared to everything. There's no multiple choice. Like, what? How many exams have multiple choice and modern doesn't? Like, so yeah, the modern exam is definitely really rough, and timing is so important. You really want to finish it. And that reminds me, I wanted to quickly take you guys through what order to do the exam in. I recommend doing it in the order of the exam in most cases, but if you know, like, let's say you know your power and authority essay is just rubbish. Like, you just know, like, it's in the bin. There's no way, like, you're going to do well with it. Like, you're so lost in the content. Leave it last. So do the paper in the order that it is. That's what NESA, like, recommends, and they've done that on purpose so that you can build up from the short answers, get to the bulk of the essays, but then you also have the short answers last, so that a lot of students who don't finish aren't losing too many marks because they didn't finish a whole essay. They're just losing a couple marks on a short answer. But in saying that, if you know that you're really trash and there's just no chance that in the next 2 weeks this miracle's going to come and you're going to like suddenly gain all these extra marks in one section, leave your worst section last. My thinking with that, and I did this in English as well, is that like if you leave the worst section last, let's say like realistically you don't finish it, like it was your worst section anyways. So I was like that for English as well. I always left Mod C last. I don't care. I just thought in paper. But I leave Mod C last because I was like, you know what? Even if I don't finish this and I lose marks, it was going to be bad anyways. So that's what I definitely recommend. And that goes for any of your subjects. If you know that there's one kind of sectional skill that you just know you're going to fall short on and you're really scared for timing and, oh, what if I don't finish? I really recommend just leaving your worst section last because we're going to lose those marks anyways. So let's just be honest with ourselves. And structure is very dependent on the task word. So identify, describe, explain, outline, compare, assess, account, and analyze. These are all questions that you guys can test yourselves if you wanted some for the shorter answers on the core. But task word is so important. I know teachers go on about this, and if my year 12 self knew that like 2 years out I'd be like lecturing people on how important task words are, I think she'd have like an attack. Because I just get so annoyed. My teacher would always go on about these words. I'm like, yes, I can define and I can explain. Like, it's not that deep. But it really is that deep. It really is that deep. And if you don't get those task words right and you're not doing the right action by those task words, kiss the mark goodbye. So it's really important that you know them. So my apologies, but we're going to have to look at some of them. But before that, I want to take you guys through how to get brownie points with markers. Now, I'm not saying any of this to scare you, but this is the realistic like aspect of the HSC, is that it is marked by hundreds of markers across the state. Now, these markers, we don't know who they are, but they are marking it online, and they are marking it a lot of the time. They're teachers, full-time teachers, and they're marking on the side. And let's just say you've got Fred. Fred is a marker. He's up late in the evening. It's 11. He's on his 30th paper that night. So the 30th modern paper. He's read the same argument 30 times on Stalin. He's on his 4th coffee. Fred wants to get all of his papers marked as soon as possible so he can focus on his new HSC class. And Fred's wife has hinted that she wants to divorce and that it's really waiting on him. So, things aren't good for Fred right now. Now, not all HSC markers are Fred, but some of them are, so you need to make sure your responses are Fred proof. Now, I don't say this to freak anyone out. There's some markers, who are not like this at all, and this is definitely like the anomaly, but these markers are marking late at night a lot of the time. They are marking online, scrolling through. They're reading the same essays over and over to the same question, marking the same thing, reading the same quotes and the same details and the same thesis, same judgment. So you want to make sure that you can make yourself stand out as much as possible across heaps and heaps of students. And the only way to do that is to do those extra little things that are going to get you brownie points with your markers. You want to do those things that they're like, oh, I haven't seen this in a couple papers. Or like, oh, like, I haven't seen a student do this in my pile today, and really stand out, because those little like oh moments are the ones that are going to get you those extra marks and differentiate you from everybody else. So markers like Fred, they use hacks to mark responses quicker. So first they're going to check how many pages you wrote. You want to aim at least 6 pages for the essay, but preferably 8. Like, I hate to say that, but that's Nessa has said that, and Nessa has written that in their assessment guide, that each of the essays are expected to be 1,000 words, which Nessa says is 6 to 8 pages. So if you're not hitting that 6 pages, when they go through your essay and they first access it, when they're marking it, they're going to scroll through, see how many pages it is. And if it's not hitting 6, you're already at a deficit point in their mind, because they're like, oh, this student hasn't written enough. And what you want to be is being that 6 to 8. So as they're scrolling through, they're like, oh, this is a very well structured essay, they've definitely written enough, so you're already at that high point. And then you want a really good introduction for your essays, because that way they're like, oh, it's a good intro. You're starting with high expectations, and even if it gets worse as you go, at least you started high. You don't want to have to prove yourself too much because you didn't write enough. So please try to hit 6 to 8. Honestly, let's say you have small handwriting, just make it bigger. Gaslight them. Just please try to hit 6. And a good way to practice that is with doing any past questions at home. Like I said, just set on a timer and do just one essay. Try to write bigger. That was my hack. I did it in English as well, and this goes the same across a lot of the humanities. The more pages you're writing, they're checking that, and they are happy when they see that students are writing a lot, even though it low-key can be waffling. Just try to hit 6. Try to hit 6, and if you're not getting there, just waffle it out a bit. But if you write any less than 6 pages, they're going to assume you wrote less than 1,000 words, which isn't a full essay. So then naturally that mark that they have to give you on structure, which does include word count, is already, and that criteria point is already falling lower. You want to aim to fill all the lines for all section 1 responses, and like I said, small handwriting, make it bigger. No excuse. Everyone's like, oh, but what if my handwriting's small? Write bigger. Force yourself one more time. You got to do this one more time and then you're free. Then another thing that they do is they look for buzzwords, which are like keywords that they know, like, and they're kind of like looking for and will always make them happy. They're like their brownie point words. So number 1 is to check if you incorporated the prescribed source consistently. So Fred's always looking for like source A, source B, source D, source C. So that's like in the short answers when it's like as seen in source A, blah blah blah, and you can underline it as well to show and direct them towards your prescribed source and show that you're not just writing about the content, you're linking that to the source and you're doing a proper analysis. They're also going to see in the essay if you've had a consistent argument throughout it. So they're going to be looking consistently for the use of judgment words like highly, significantly, profoundly, low extent, high extent, all of that. So don't switch it up too much. Keep your topic sentences consistent and kind of try to reuse those judgment words. But we're going to go through essays later, and judgments are so important. Just repeat yourself. Overdo it. You're never going to get told like, oh, you're referring to your argument too much. You're backing up your thesis and judgment too much. That's never the feedback. The feedback is always you're not keeping a consistent thesis enough, not referring back to judgment enough. So don't think like, oh, I'm writing about it too much. You physically can't. Just keep like linking back to your judgment whenever you can and using those actual like evaluation or like assessment words of highly and, you know, significant, profound, paramount importance, all of that. Go to synonym.com. ChatGPT can help. Anyways, Fred's also use other hacks like this to mark. So don't use arrows or asterisks if you forgot information, because like I know a lot of students do this, and I used to do this as well, but then I got in trouble for it in one of my internals because it looks like you haven't structured your response well and that you kind of rushed through your essay and then maybe you're going back to it. So if you do forget info, you have 2 options. So first ask yourself, like, is it really that important? Because a lot of the time it's not even. Like you think like, oh, like maybe it might be like one extra detail, but it's not even that important half the time. So you can just ignore it. It's not worth adding in one little fact that isn't going to make much of a difference and then losing on that structured part, because they, like I said, they're reading online, they're scrolling through. If you have like an asterisk all the way at the end, but it's from your first paragraph, like 5 pages before, and they have to go all the way up, like we don't want to risk it. We don't want to risk it. But if it is really important and you just genuinely forgot it, see if there's a way that you can incorporate it into a later paragraph or link it back somewhere else in the essay, rather than having those asterisks or doing like an arrow to like add information. I know it seems like a good idea at the time, but in terms of structure, because structure is a criteria point, it's really not worth it, and it just messes up the cohesiveness of your essay and makes it harder for them to read as markers, especially if they're reading it at night. We just don't want to upset these Freds. Fred's going through it. Fred's, you know, on the way to divorce. If you're running out of time, it's always better to start the next section than finish the one that you're on. So if you've been writing for 45 minutes, you've probably written enough. Just leave. Just leave. I know it's very tempting to just like, you know, let me just finish this, or like, you know, the conclusion, or I just need to make this like one more paragraph. But you don't, like, that'll get you, I don't know, 2 to 3 marks compared to losing 5+ for not starting a whole other section. So really try to get as much as you can done for each section. If you have a little bit left for like one, that's completely fine. But you really should be trying to get as much as you can done. And please, in saying that, for the essays, that's more for the short answers. Like if you don't finish all your short answers or you leave a couple lines, whatever, but for your essay, don't forget your conclusion. So if you've been running out of time and you need to start the next section, just quickly, let's say you're halfway through a paragraph, leave that paragraph and still write a conclusion, because if you don't write a conclusion, you can't get the band 6 for your essay without it, even if it's a perfect essay, because it's not well structured. Because a structure, and the structure criteria is intro, body, conclusion. So if you don't have that, even if it's a great essay, they're taking marks off for you for that. That's exactly the same for English. And it's not going to be considered well structured. So it's just not worth it. So as you're going along, try to finish as much as you can. If you're halfway through a paragraph, just quickly leave it, write a quick up, conclusion. Modern conclusions, we're going to go through them, how to write them, but they seriously should not be more than like 5 lines max, minimum 3. Like 3 to 4 is always a goal. So it's not hard to just quickly write up a conclusion to sum up your essay, dip, and then go to the other sections. But for short answers, if it's been over 45 minutes, just leave. Just leave, get onto the essays and get the marks there. Now, you want to avoid silly mistakes as well. Number 1 is reading the question carefully. Number 2 is checking the dates, because this is, I didn't even realize that this at the time, but then when I started tutoring here at HSC Notes, I was like, wow, I wonder if I ever made this mistake. Sometimes you can talk about content that's outside the time period set in the question, which means you'll lose marks. So here we've got evaluate the impact of differing visions for the USSR from 1917 to 1928. But the differing vision dot point typically starts at 1921. So if you didn't actually read the question closely, you would miss that, and you would have had to talk about earlier content as well. So just make sure you're looking out for dates and that you have proper dates in your notes as you're memorizing, because it's really easy to fall for this trick. So you do have to memorize key dates and like how they fit into the syllabus, but the good thing is that all the dates are in the syllabus, so you're all good to know which time frame it is. And again, the task word is such an important thing, because they're not just filler words. They tell you exactly what you need to do and how to answer the question. And a lot of the time people are ignoring the task word and they just end up describing. I know I used to do this, because like, I'm not looking at discuss and being like, okay, I have to look at both sides. Like, no, I'm just writing. I'm writing about the source. But the task word is so important. That's all they teach me at uni. The task word is everything. And many of them actually require a lot more critical thinking than others. So if you don't know which ones are low order or medium or high order task words, goodbye to those marks. So let's talk about it. Guys, I'm sorry. I really don't want to do this. This would be my nightmare in year 12. So I know, I'm sorry. Just stay in the chat if you're watching live. We'll talk. But let's talk about task words. The easiest ones and our favorite ones to get marks are identify. And you do not understand. Some students will fill in like all the lines and go over the lines for identify questions, but why? Because all you have to do is simply state a key feature or an important attribute. So here we've got the example 1, identify 2 features of Nazi ideology. All you have to do, social Darwinism, totalitarianism. You're just literally identifying, like you're just stating what they are. You don't even have to say 2 features of Nazi ideology are blah, blah, blah. You don't have to say social Darwinism and blah, blah, blah and totalitarianism and define it. You're literally just identifying it. Like you could literally write 4 words and you'd get the 2 marks. That's a 2-mark question, and that's 2 marks right there. So be smart with your time, and this is why knowing task words and what they expect from you for each of them is so important, because it can actually save you time in your answering, so you're not writing anything that you don't need to. But yeah, for identify, just quickly state it. You can just write like 1, social Darwinism, 2, totalitarianism. Either way, you get the marks. You don't need anything more than literally 3 words here. Now for a defined question, you're making statement to the meaning or interpretation. You don't need much detail, like at all. You don't need this like super detailed, full-on encyclopedia definition. It's more like a Wikipedia definition. You know how Wikipedia definitions are so quick, so straight to the point, and really straightforward. They'll give like a translation if necessary. And it's not that much detail, but it's enough to understand what it is. That's exactly what it is here for defining, and it's a low order task word for HSC. So just get straight to the point. Doesn't need to be super fancy, just as long as it establishes like the base of the idea. Now, in terms of definitions, I didn't even memorize any definitions fully. I kind of use my own understanding and what I understood them to be. And because defined questions usually won't be more than 3 marks, 4 marks max. 4 marks max, but even then, very, very, very rare that you'd see that, especially in the HSC. You can get away with just having a decent understanding and writing up your own definition, but it's up to you if you do want to memorize some of your own for your responses. Now, explain and describe questions are definitely more into the 3, 4, and 5 markers. Explain is telling how things work or how they came to be. So here we've got explain the main differences between democracy and totalitarianism. A lot of the time in explain, because you are telling how they work or how they are, you end up giving a definition. So here you'd actually give a definition of democracy, give a definition of totalitarianism, and because it's the differences, you're going to compare the 2 and explain how they're different. And then in a describe here, we've got, you're just spelling out the main aspects of an idea or topic. There is no reason that you should be losing describe marks unless you just genuinely don't know the content. But describe is literally just storytelling. I know in modern, like when it comes to narrative writing, it's really easy to fall into that. And I would do that in my essays too, where I focus too much on the content, not enough on the skill, and then I'd kind of just start reciting the textbook and like explaining and just describing what happened without like having any assessment. Before I describe, you're literally just telling the story. So here we've got describe the role of Joseph Goebbels, who you should know. You should know Joseph Goebbels. Know at least two of the other key figures, but Joseph Goebbels is one of the easier ones, in my opinion, to write about, just because he was the Minister for Propaganda. Um, but here we've got that he was the Reich Minister for Propaganda and Public Enlightenment, which meant that he was in charge of producing Nazi propaganda and enable the hegemony of the Hitler myth in Nazi Germany. Not even like super out there, but it would get you the marks. And it's not, this really complex vocabulary or terminology. It's straight to the point. Just really need to know the main titles, main dates, and move on. Outline is where you get a little bit more. So outline the key features of the Weimar Constitution. I really, really do recommend knowing the Weimar in good detail, because it's one of those dot points that not a lot of students nor schools cover in much detail, because a lot of students are quick to get to the core part of the Nazis and Hitler's rule, but I feel like it always comes up, and I've seen it in quite a lot of trial pass papers, but also in the HSC. So that's something I definitely recommend going over, and I just feel like it's overlooked a lot of the time, but Nessa knows that, and sorry, it's underlooked, and Nessa knows that, so then they use that to their advantage. But in an outline, you're indicating the main features of a topic or sequence of events, so you're going a bit more into detail than you are when you're describing, and then you'll actually bring in examples as well. So here for the Weimar, we've got Article 48, which they use in the Reichstag if there was the emergency, and then that's how Hitler ended up gaining his power. Compare, contrast, and account for are definitely when you're getting into those higher task words, but even then it's not the highest. So compare is identifying the characteristics or qualities two or more things have in common. So for example, compare the ambitions for Germany in Europe and Japan in the Asia Pacific. Compare and contrast can come up in your 25-mark essays, but they're not as common as assess, analyze, and to what extent. I'm sure you guys know that, but it can come up as a 25 marker. If not, like I said, it is rare. It is more likely to be 8 to 12 in your short answers, or even potentially 15 if they end up pulling one of those. And then account for is explain, clarify, and give reasons for. So it's usually an argument because you're giving reasoning. So here it's like account for Mussolini's rise to power. So it's basically just asking you, why did Mussolini rise to power? So you have to give an argument and say he rose to power because of this, and you're having that judgment. And then the highest task words, and these are the most common for your essays, you can best believe at least one of the essay questions will have these ones, is assess, evaluate, and analyze, and to what extent. So for assessment, when you're assessing or when you're evaluating, you're considering the value or the importance, and even here you have to actually cite what that value and importance is. So here we've got assess the significance of Lenin in the Bolshevik consolidation of power. So you'd have to state the significance, and you have to say Lenin was highly significant or profoundly significant to the Bolshevik consolidation power in his role throughout, and really still make that judgment. The most important thing in these task work questions and in your essays is that you have a judgment, and a judgment is just an opinion. Your judgment is just your opinion, and your opinion is backed up by those judgment critical thinking words of highly significant, extent, etc. Analyze is where you're breaking down the issue, so analyze the changing nature of Soviet foreign policy, and you're going to show how they interrelate between your paragraphs. And then to what extent is where you're exploring the case in relation to its validity when accounting all known evidence. So here we've got to what extent was Mao the most critical factor in the establishment of the Communist Party in China. You have to say the extent. I know that's obvious, but a lot of students don't, especially in English. I'm going to keep referring to English in this essay, but in this lecture, but it's only because English essays and modern essays very, very similar. They honestly interlink. You can't tell me that your modern paragraphs, like at the core, are not just teal or peel paragraphs. It's the same thing. But even in English and in modern as well, you need to be stating the extent. So Mao was the most critical factor to a high extent, and you need to keep that judgment consistent throughout your whole essay and keep repeating the extent, thus reflecting the great extent in which, therefore proving, therefore supporting the great extent. Like, you have to keep linking back to that and having that word extent. It needs to be at least in the beginning and ending of all your paragraphs as a base, at least minimum. But even then, if you want to be getting into that high band 5, band 6 kind of category, you need to be consistently referring to it wherever possible. I'd say at least 4 times in your actual body paragraphs. But we're going to get a bit more to that when we get into your essays. Now, let's talk about bias, which is really annoying to talk about because it's so overused and it's very understood in HSC history, but that's not your fault because when you're in year 7 to 10 and you're doing history, bias is always a bad thing. Like, bias is such a bad thing, and he's just always like, oh, bias, bias, bias. But the reality of life and the reality of history is that, like, everyone is biased. I'm biased, you're biased. That's just the world that we live in. Everyone has their own bias. But that's not synonymous with unreliable uses, because a lot of the time, especially in modern and the sources that you're looking at, bias can actually enhance a source's usefulness and help it even more. And it can actually show the underlying ideology, underlying political agenda, or underlying personal prejudice, which is literally just what bias is when we're analyzing sources. So instead of using bias, if you wanted to quickly like write these down, these are great ideas to like use instead of it, which are more complex, but they're also like, they're brownie points for your markers. They want to see these words. But bias isn't inherently a bad thing. And you don't want to be like, the bias therefore supports. You want to be using the source therefore exposes the underlying ideologies of the Nazi or whatever, and continue like that. But I definitely recommend just having these words down because they are good forms of terminology to use. But we can't just take a source at face value because there's a multitude of things that we have to look at when we're looking at usefulness. So I'm going to be taking you guys through perspective and reliability and how you can actually cheat the system and memorize these before going in. And it's exactly the same with English. I feel I should have just called this like modern and English lecture, but even in English, you don't know what the unseen sources are going to be for your paper 1, but you do, and you can prepare for different techniques and their effects. Like, you know that in a poem there's going to be imagery, there's going to be figurative language, there's going to be metaphors. That's like, you know that. Same with rhyme, same with enjambment. You know the main technique. Same with a photo. You know that you can, in a photo the techniques are going to be positioning or contrast or the use of color or vectors or whatever it is. So what you can do with that is then learn those techniques, be able to have like definitions of them so that you understand them to yourself, but also already memorize their techniques so that going into your English exam, if you see a photo, you're like, okay, I know positioning affects the validity and the importance. So if something's centered in the middle, it's of central importance, and then you can link that to the English photo that you've gotten and use that in your short answers. But it's exactly the same in modern, where you guys now can memorize the values and limitations of extracts, the values and limitations of photos, of propaganda, of any quotes from historians or speeches or songs or whatever the source is, or diagrams and graphs. You guys can memorize the usefulness of those sources already, and then just go and link that to the source that you get on the day. And all you're actually adding on is the unknown part from the day, but you've already got that base prepared. So what we're going to be looking at is perspective and reliability. They're two different things. So perspective is the attitude or worldview regarding something, and then reliability is the degree to which the source is accurate and trustworthy. So a lot of the time students focus on reliability, like, oh, it's a primary source, oh, it's not reliable because it's from like a leader, or it's not reliable because it's from like a military soldier or someone who was on that side. But even though that's true, this perspective, it has that perspective, and it's actually very powerful in its perspective, because then it opens us to the underlying ideologies, to that bias, and then we can understand one side of that. It might not be the entire truth and getting to that whole truth, but still being able to see the different sides is so important. And if we weren't able to expose that underlying ideology or those underlying personal agendas, you wouldn't really be able to get to that whole truth and that actual story and truth to what happened. So you want to make sure that you're analyzing the factors above, because it shows you how useful the source is, but also what it can be used for. So there's factual reliability and there's reliability as evidence, and these are two different things. Factual reliability is what we're very used to, so it's whether or not the content of the source is factually accurate and that it can be corroborated by facts, statistics, and sources relevant to the issues or events in question. Reliability as evidence is whether or not the content of the source, irrespective of its factual accuracy, can be used as evidence of attitudes, belief, and agendas at the time of those producing the source and their audience, And is the fact that the source is biased a good thing? So it's actually asking, like, it shows that bias can actually be a good thing because it makes the evidence more reliable so that you can see the attitudes, belief, or agendas of individuals at that time. So factual reliability is very much down to accuracy and the type of source that it is, while reliability as evidence is that evidence of those underlying attitudes and agendas that we were talking about before. Now, what's going to affect a source's perspective and reliability? There's all these different factors. There's contextual factors, so the age, gender, national, race, ethnicity, the class, the profession, or the level of education, and they're all implicit biases, while purpose and motive really affect the perspective and reliability. And this is what more you can talk about in your answers, which is political agenda, ideological agenda, whether it's going to boost morale or support, the personal prejudice, or if there was a search for rewards and that's why they're releasing that information. And then there's structural factors, like if it's censored, if it's complete or incomplete, and the methodology, whether it's a secondary source or not. So these are all things that you can talk about when you're analyzing the values and limitations of your sources, but focusing in on this part is where you're going to be able to get the most marks. So when you're looking at a source, questions that you want to ask yourself is, was the source produced in close proximity to the time, place, or events? Was it produced by someone involved in the event? Was it produced to be published? Was it produced for what purpose? Was it a personal, political, ideological, educational, etc. purpose? Is it an extract? Was it the product of extensive research, or was it peer reviewed? All of these are going to affect the perspective and reliability of your source. So it is good to ask yourself these questions. And even if you wanted to write these down on a flashcard, and when you're doing some source analysis work or you're doing a past paper, have that flashcard next to you. And when you're looking at a source, ask yourself these questions, and it's going to give you the answers. These are the questions that you have to ask to know what to write about with sources. Because I feel like with sources, it's really easy to just describe what's happening in the source and to not actually analyze the source. But it is a source analysis, so we do need that type of like critical skill, and these are the questions that can help you do that. Now we're going to look at cheating the system, which is a fun little trick that will help you ace your source analysis. I'm just going to quickly drink some water. Sorry, I don't know why I had to announce that. I just didn't want like an awkward pause. But we're going to be looking at how you can respond to the source analysis, because it always has more to do with the source type rather than the source content. They can ask you on any of those dot points in your exam. But the actual types of sources that they're going to ask you on are photographs, now propaganda, whether that's speeches, posters, or flyers. They can have extracts from historian works or textbooks, diary entries, letters, newspapers, or forms of literature like poems, songs, narratives. But each of the source types contain unique features that then impact the perspective of the reliability of the source. So you can memorize them, and then no matter what source you will be able, like you can answer it. That is a guarantee. If you memorize these features of perspective and reliability, you will always have something to write about these sources. So if there is one like core part of this lecture, I promise you it's what you're about to get here. So let's look at photographs first. Now, when it comes to the perspective of the photograph, the perspective is always neutral unless it's very obviously staged or filtered. And if the picture does appear to be staged, then it just ends up being propaganda. But in terms of reliability, you can write about whether it was produced at the same time as the event, providing a snapshot into the past. And the photographs, of course, are primary sources. So then in terms of reliability, they get that mark. Now, if it's a wide camera angle, you get the complete picture. And that's a value of the source because you can see exactly what's happening. While if it's a narrow camera angle and you're only getting one part of it, it's potentially presenting an incomplete picture and we don't know what's happening outside of the frame, which is a limitation. And then if it's a neutral perspective as well, there's no hidden agenda, which then adds to its reliability. Now, propaganda, and very likely that it comes up as a source analysis. I'm sure quite a lot of you guys would have had at least one form of propaganda as like your photograph or like your source in the short answers in your trials. Now, for perspective, propaganda is going to show the government or the special interest groups perspective. It can show that whether it's ideological, political, or persuasive. And the propaganda, granted that it was effective at the time, so like British propaganda was, it can also be an indication of the general perspective of the audience at the time and ordinary citizens. So you can use the propaganda to understand what popular society believed and what the majority of their values were. While for reliability, when it comes to propaganda, you can see if it was produced at or in close proximity to the events in question, and most of the time propaganda is going to be from the time, and it was a primary source. But it was also written with a primary goal to persuade an audience to accept a particular ideology, political agenda, or belief rather than to tell the truth. So this I wanted to show you guys, because here you can see where it lacks in reliability, it's actually very powerful in terms of perspective. Propaganda isn't reliable in understanding the whole truth because of that intention to persuade audience to, take on this ideology or this belief or believe in their political agenda. But even though it's not reliable there factually, as evidence, it's actually really reliable as a form of perspective, because it shows you the perspective of that time and that ideological and their persuasive perspective and what that government or special interest group believed and their side of it and their intention. So perspective, it's great, but reliability is limited. And this is why having both of them and memorizing these points, which you can apply to any propaganda source you get, any photograph source you get, and all the sources that we're going to go through, means you always have values and limitations to talk about, and you don't have to come up with them because you can just have them memorized and then connect them to the source that they give you. Now, in terms of propaganda, I wanted to add in just little bits of content wherever I could. I wanted to go through as much as possible, but because we're looking at skills, it was really hard to. But I just wanted to add in some of these notes about propaganda. You guys know that Nazi propaganda was successful because it was very clear, direct, and simple. They would use the radio, cinema, there were rallies and demonstrations, and obviously there was a lot of propaganda in the education curriculum too. And all of that was a form to spread the Hitler myth and spread the Nazi message as Hitler as the mighty defender of Germany. So these are just some points that you can then connect to perspective and reliability while linking back to the source that you get on the day. Now, historians and textbooks. Perspective-wise, it's an academic perspective. They've got a neutral perspective, and I know, trust, if you're doing extension history, like, that's going to be uncomfortable. But you can write about that in modern. It's fine to say there's a neutral perspective, because if a historian or an academic is writing it from, like, in a textbook and for an educational purpose, then their purpose is to educate, not to pass judgment. When you're reading, like, your history textbook, there's not a lot of times where you ever feel like, oh, this author is clearly on this side. Like, it's very clear that their purpose is to educate and they're not making judgments on it. So in terms of perspective, you can trust that that's neutral. But in terms of reliability, it's a product of extensive research. It has been peer reviewed. These are both values, because so much research has gone into them. It's not just, one form of evidence that's created it. It's actually quite a lot. It's been peer reviewed, so people have checked it and gone over it, added to it, provided feedback and criticism. But it's usually produced much later than the events in the question. So historians and textbooks most of the time I'd say, if not all the time, are from secondary sources, and naturally a secondary source is limited, and it's usually an extract. And this is such a good point that you can exploit. I say it every lecture I do. If you guys get an extract in the HSC, naturally it is limited. It doesn't mean if it is the best extract you have ever read. Because it is an extract and it's not the full piece, it is a limitation of the source, because by nature it's incomplete. Yes, maybe that source is all about how Hitler's laws were so controlling, but then possibly the next paragraph could have been about, like, the freedoms that they brought, which, non-existent. But because all you've gotten was that actual paragraph, naturally it's incomplete. You don't know what came next, so it's not a true kind of whole picture of the event or of the topic that the historian's writing about. So by nature it's incomplete, and by nature it's limited, even if it's a really good extract. Because I feel like a lot of the time when I received extracts, a lot of the information there was true. Like, I was reading it and I had gotten questions where it's like, examine the values and limitations, and I'm like, but everything's true. Like, I could easily write about the values of it because it's using statistics and it's, a product of extensive research and it's been peer reviewed, and there's that neutral perspective. So it's meant to educate, it's not to pass judgment. Like, the only limitation I could write about was, oh, it's a secondary source. But another limitation you can also write about when it comes to extracts is that it's an extract. Like, its form as an extract means that it's extracted and it's just a part of it. It's not the whole complete truth of that event or that topic. So use that, please, because you will get an extract. That's like, you always get at least one extract. You guys know that. So that's a really good piece. So for limitations, secondary source and the fact that it's an extract are really easy ones to write about, and they'll work every single time. You can receive a diary entry. Now, in terms of perspective, it's highly personal. And if it's written by someone important to the event, it's also highly relevant and unique. So if you read Hitler's diary or like an extract from Stalin's diary, for example, but for reliability, it's not produced for publication, so the thoughts contained within the entry can be assumed to be genuine, as why would they lie to themselves? Because diaries are so personal and so private. So in terms of reliability, you can have that as a value because it is the truth in terms of their perspective. And it's a primary source, of course, because it was produced at or in close proximity to the events by someone who actually experienced them, which is very valuable. But at the same time, it's highly personal. So even though it's good that it's highly personal and it wasn't, and for that reason, it wasn't produced for publication, at the same time, because it's so personal, their judgment is potentially clouded by their own prejudices or political agendas or ideology, which is great in terms of understanding perspective and very valuable there. But in terms of the factual reliability, it's limited because it's just one person's thoughts, and that's naturally going to be clouded by their own inherent bias and underlying prejudice and ideologies and beliefs. So again, a lot of these intertwine, and where it's lacking here in reliability, it's actually very valuable for the perspective. So good to see both. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I 100% am. When it comes to letters, again, they're highly personal, and it's great if they're written by someone who is important to the event, like a leader, because they're relevant and unique. In terms of reliability, it's a primary source, so naturally that's going to be a value. And it was written to be read by at least one other person. But again, it's highly personal, so it can and naturally is clouded by that inherent bias. But it also might have gone the process of censorship, whether they censored the letter or officially it was censored um, by the government. So if that was to take place, then naturally it's incomplete and it's not the whole truth. Like here, we've got lines censored, so you can't see exactly what happened in this story and in this letter. So it's not a true reflection of the whole event or the whole topic, and therefore it's like incomplete in nature. Censorship is very similar to extracts, where you don't have the whole picture because naturally it's just incomplete. So that affects the reliability, and it's actually a limitation because you can't get the whole truth. Now, newspaper stories can come up as well. Now, in terms of perspective, it has to be considered because it could have been from a government or special interest group, and a lot of the time the government's work were behind the publication, so they ended up being ideological, political, and persuasive. Now, that is a great thing in terms of perspective because it will reflect the perspective of that side or that interest. But in terms of reliability, it could have undergone the process of censorship, whether that was official or self-censored by the paper. But either way, a lot of the time, newspapers were not releasing anything that was against popular opinion or that was against the government because they were controlled and they were a form of propaganda, and media was abused by the government to push their political agendas. So factual, in terms of factual reliability, it's limited there. But it was produced at or in the close proximity to the time by someone who experienced them. So in terms of the actual source as a primary source, it is still very, very reliable. However, the perspective is obviously straying towards that one side if the newspaper was controlled by the government. And then literature, which isn't very common, but it is good to just know. Literature can range from songs to narratives to even poems. So perspective-wise, they're very personal. And it's a popular sentiment of what people believed at the time. So for example, war songs really do reflect the anti-war kind of ideology and how people wanted the war to finish and conflict to finish. In terms of reliability, it is a primary source because they're producing close proximity to the events by someone who experienced them first time. But they are usually highly personal. So anytime a piece or a source is personal, it's going to naturally be clouded by internal prejudices, political agenda or ideology. And literature, the role is to entertain. It's not to pass judgment. It's not to educate. At the base, it's to entertain. And it is really important to remember that because that is limiting its reliability because of its intention. So other things that you can consider is obviously the source because, like I said, if it's an extract, it's limited. We don't know what the rest of the source said. And maybe what the next paragraph was is going to dramatically like alter the perception of the content, but you don't see that. So then you're only getting this one insight. So naturally, it's just a limitation. Now, if the source is from a reigning monarch, prime minister, or president, it also means it's the perspective of the highest tier of government. which enhances its reliability in a way because it demonstrates the internationally perceived perspective of the nation that they rule. So when like British and when the French and when other countries heard about Hitler or read anything from Hitler or heard about anything from his speeches, they assumed that that's what all of the Germans believed because he was the highest tier of government and the highest form of control. So in terms of reliability, it does, and it is a way to show the internationally perceived perspective. But again, it is skewered by their internal prejudices and their own intention. That's a great thing for perspective and it's going to enhance that, but reliability, it does limit it. Now, when it comes to short answers, they are so, so, so important because they feature in 50% of your paper. So if you guys are really bad at essays or, it's just not what you feel confident in, you don't really know how to gain those extra marks, you keep getting the same marks, it's really hard to push yourself when these weigh just as much. So if you know that the 25 mark essay is not going to be your strong suit, really hone in on short answers. They aren't necessarily easy marks because it's actually easy to lose marks here. Like you can get 2 out of 3, then 4 out of 5, then 5 out of 7, 7 out of 10. Like it sounds really good, but then that's 18 out of 25. You've lost 7 marks, even though it's just like 1 or 2 marks here. And then that ends up being 72%. While if you lost like 4 marks on an essay, which is also like a good mark and what you'd consider good, then that's 84%. So there's a big difference between the two. And I think a lot of students, and I know I did this as well, I just kind of ignored short answers because I was like, oh, like I can't even study. I don't know what the source is going to be. It's going to be different depending on the day, and like it's all unseen, so I can't really prepare, and I just need to know like a bit of content. Like I don't even have to write that much. It'll be like 12 marks max, whatever. Like I'm going to focus on the essays, but they do weigh just as much, and because they are shorter marks, realistically it's easier to get 3 out of 3 and then 4 out of 4 than it is to get 25 out of 25 on your HSC Russia essay. You get me? So I feel like spending time on this is really important. I know a lot of students really do hone in on the essays and the content for that because it is horrifying that they can literally ask you on any dot point, but they can do exactly the same here, and it weighs just as much. So if you know that essays aren't your best suit, it's completely fine because the other 50% is these short answers where you can get the marks as long as you're not making these silly mistakes, as long as you know the task words. And if you've memorized these source values and limitations for perspective and reliability, you already have half the answer. So then you see to sprinkle a little bit of content, link back to the source, you're fine. Full marks will get at it. Now, if it's a 1 to 2 mark question, you're going to get straight to the point. We don't need to go into too much detail. You just want to be as direct as possible. You don't even need detail unless they specify, but a lot of the time 1 to 2 mark questions are literally just an identify. For 3 to 5 mark questions, we need to get into our big girl era and write full sentences. You want to include a little bit of context, but you don't want to go overboard, and nothing more than a sentence. And then you need at least 1 piece of evidence. The rule of thumb is that each point you make should have an evidence, like a piece of evidence to back it up, whether that's like a detail or a source. And then 6 to 8 mark questions is where you really need to ramp it up. So that's where you have a really short introduction and you outline your response. But that doesn't need to be anything more than 1 sentence. It's kind of just like a baby thesis. And then you want to have like 1 point per mark. So if it's like a 6 marker, you want to look at like 3 factors, for example, or like 3 separate pieces of evidence. And then per point, like I just said, 1 piece of evidence. I want to look at source analysis together because I remember before saying that like it's really easy to fall into describing the source rather than like analyzing it. So what you don't want to do, if we look at this source, we've got here, source A is a photograph of a German family featuring a mother and her 3 blonde children. The photograph is in black and white and none of the figures are facing the camera. Like obviously, and you're probably reading this now and be like, oh, that's like who would write that? Like you're just describing it. But it's so easy to do on the day because you focus too much in on the source. And this is the issue. A lot of the time students get marked down because they're not writing about the source enough. And that'll happen to them in trials. So then when they get to the HSC, they'll pull off this where they write too much about the source, but they're not actually analyzing it. What you want to do is here what we have in green, which really balances the two. You need to have your content, but if you're just writing content and you're reciting your textbook and like your notes and you have no reference to the source, then it means nothing. They're actually going hand in hand. So the families shown in source A, and it's underlined, represent the ideal family unit in Nazi Germany. So we're looking at family and we've referenced the source. So we've got the source, but now we're connecting that to the actual content. They are of Aryan descent as evidenced by their fair skin and blonde hair. So You're using the source, their fair skin and blonde hair. That's evidence that we see in the source, linking that to the Aryan descent, and that's the content and the dot point. And the females are dressed conservatively. Again, source, reflecting the traditional feminine dress code of Nazi Germany. Content. So any point that you want to make about the source, so let's say you're talking about their blonde hair, you have to say how that connects to the content, what that shows. Same with the dress, what that shows. This image was most likely used as propaganda to encourage more Aryan women to have more children. Pure content, but you can tell that also by their smiling faces and like that kind of dramatication of family. But I hope that makes sense, because it's definitely a very big mistake that students make, and you'll either get, talking too much about the source and not linking back to content, or way too much about content and not linking to source. So my rule of thumb, and what always worked for me in getting really high marks in the short answers, was any time that I mentioned something about the source, like pick out a feature, link it back. You got to link it back, and you got to say, okay, well, this connects to this idea from the syllabus. Their hair shows this, their smile shows this, the fact that it's a family shows this. There always needs to be that duality. So you can never talk about just the source on its own, and you can never talk about just the content. You want to be talking about the both of them. So here we've got another one that we can do together. Source A is a photograph taken in Nazi Germany, the salient image being that of Adolf Hitler, the Führer, with a little blonde girl who appears younger than 3. Hitler is smiling, whereas the young girl wears a scout. Okay, like we can see, you can see that. And again, this is where you fall into it, where you're just describing the source, no link to content, and like no analysis whatsoever. Like obviously we can see that, but instead what we're going to do, source A, and like I said, underlined. You will all underline. This is me blackmailing you. You will all underline. Source A reveals the way in which Hitler was presented through propaganda in Nazi Germany. So very kind of general starting. In order to consolidate the Führer myth, propaganda such as this, see? Content, evidence. Depict Hitler with young Aryan children. Yep. So we've got the source again. Served to not only humanize the dictator, but also further reinforce a paternalistic image of Hitler. Back to content, presenting him as the loving father of all Aryan Germans. Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. How can you flaw this? How can you flaw this? I just wanted to show you guys this example of how closely connected content and the source have to be, because it's just so easy to lose marks here, but it's just not worth it, because you don't even need to have this really great detail and these fancy statistics or historian quotes to back it up. It's literally what you see connected to what you know and the core ideas of the syllabus. So being able to integrate the sources is obviously really important. For the course study, you're going to get at least one prescribed source for most of your responses, and it's like the base of the study. So effective integration is not quoting the entire source at the beginning like we did here, and providing no analysis and then just describing it. It needs to be explicit, so you want to say as shown in source A and underlining it, like I said, and you want it to be analytical, so you're analyzing it with reference to the content instead of just describing it. So here we've got a photograph of a book burning in Berlin, and obviously it's a primary source. And these are some like ideas for content that you guys could link back to. So obviously this has got a lot to do with censorship, because the Nazis censored all opposing views from entering any of the public's consciousness. And it was conducted across all mediums of communication and even violently enforced in times. Now this, because it is from 1933, this is where you would have to link it back to the content very heavily and talk about the 1933 book burnings. Now you could use specific statistics, like how over 25,000 books were deemed appropriate by Nazi librarians and university students and therefore destroyed, or you could use details like how works that were written by Jews, so that includes Einstein and Freud, or socialists, communists, anarchists, and pacifists and others. You could talk about how their works were destroyed, or you could talk about the first books that were destroyed, or that authors were persecuted, and were either executed or sent to concentration camps. So you can mix that up, or you could even just give a definition of what the book burnings were, but that's how you would link content to the photo. Now we're going to get started with types of essays and get into essay skills. I hope that was really helpful-ish for short answers, and that it just clarifies 3 things: the importance of task words, that bias is not a bad thing and you can actually use it to your advantage, and the importance of perspective and reliability, and memorizing those. I need You guys need to do it for me. You need to do it for me. Memorizing some of those points for each of them, even if you just put on a flashcard and you have like one side of the flashcard has photograph and on the back side you've got like that table and like maybe 2 points under reliability and 2 under perspective, please. It'll really, really help your marks. And number 4 is to underline the source, but I'll leave it at that. Let's talk about types of essays that you can write. We're going to be getting into essay writing, essay samples. I've got some past essay like paragraphs, intros, conclusions, and exactly how to structure them, because structure is so important in modern. And I always used to think my essays were like all about my content, but it's so big on structure as well. And like I said, we're gonna bring out that teal structure and pull it out. So for types of essays that you can write, there's thematic essays, there's factor essays, and there's syllabus essays. Thematic essays is where you're actually using themes of the time, while syllabus and factor essays is where you're using the events and the actual dot points to structure your paragraphs. So a thematic essay could be if you're separating your essay into like themes of like social, economic, military, government, etc. While factor or syllabus essays is when you're actually using events. So maybe one paragraph is about an event from 1917 and then another paragraph is about a vote or a conflict or whatever it is. Let's talk about a thesis. I feel like this, like I said, this is kind of like an English lecture low-key because they both overlap. But a thesis is the overarching argument that you make throughout your essay. It's a complete sentence that contains one main idea, and this one main idea controls your entire essay. So the markers are looking for a strong judgment and evidence that you can think critically about what you have learned. And it might be easy to think that all they care about is memorization, but like history is about the argument. Like I said, you can know every single dot point inside out, but if you cannot argue those dot points, and the only way to practice arguing them is with like past papers and, you know, actually thinking about your judgments, essay plans, and skills work, getting that 23, 24, 25 is very hard to do. It provides your essay with a sense of direction, what to talk about and what can be ignored. It's really important. And your markers, they'll read that first judgment and it sets up your entire essay and their entire perception. After they've read your introduction, like I said, they're going to open, like, let's say I'm Fred, I'm about to go through divorce. Fred, I'm going to open up your paper. I'm going to scroll through, see how many pages it is. If it's 6 to 8, I'm like, yep, looks like a good essay. Already I have a high perception of your work in my mind. Then I'm going to read your first sentence. I'm going to be like, yep, good judgment. And by the end of your introduction, especially after that last line, I'm already going to have an idea, okay, is this band 4? Is this band 5? Is this band 6? Is this band 2? So imagine I'm Fred now and I open, I see you've only written 3.5 pages. I see your introduction is like 3 lines. And I see that you don't start with a judgment, nor do you have like a critical assessment or evaluation where you have those words like highly significant, or you don't have like an actual judgment. I'm not gonna be very happy. I'm not gonna be very happy, and it's gonna start my perception of your work. And like we said, markers do. We're talking about bias and how everyone's biased. Markers are biased too, and this is what they can be biased on. So you don't want me to start, and me as Fred or your marker to start with that lower perception, and then you have to prove yourself throughout your paragraphs. If anything, you want to make sure you're hitting that 6 to 8 pages. Your first thesis is really strong, really powerful, straight to the point, contains that one idea, and that your introduction is really concise and strong. So that after your markers read through, they're like, okay, 6 to 8 pages, good thesis, strong judgment. After they send your introduction, they're like, you know what, this is like a band 6 so far. So at least you're starting high, and maybe you don't feel too good with the question or the content, you fall a bit short. At least you're falling. You'd rather fall than have to prove yourself from a low point. Just gaslight them, write a great intro, and the rest of it can be questionable. I'm obviously joking. But a thesis statement has to contain a subject and the opinion. So the subject is dictated by the question. So the subject is whatever, like the event or the theme or the topic that they're asking about, the specific dot point, while your opinion is the judgment, which is your words highly, profoundly, paramount, etc. Now, please, we get this question a lot. If a thesis statement is my opinion, because it is your opinion and you don't have to use the popular opinion, you can completely go against it. Can you use personal pronouns? No. You will not be using in my opinion, I think, I believe. No, I, we, me. No. No, and you don't do it in English ever. Even in English, if they ask you for your interpretation or your understanding, you never will use any personal pronouns. You're always writing from the academic perspective. And if you do use I believe or I think, you guys know this. I don't want to, you guys know, you guys are smart, don't worry. I know you know this, but we never, even if they write, consider your opinion. they don't care. You're writing it from an academic perspective. Now, in terms of your thesis, and like I said, essay plans can really help with your thesis because you can do practice questions, whether it's from HSC or trials, and prepare theses, and then do work on writing good theses in short amounts of time. And then you might get lucky and the practice thesis that you wrote or the practice essay you plan is actually very similar to the question that you get on the day. Manifest it, but a good thesis needs to answer the question. That's the most important thing. If it doesn't answer the question, doesn't matter what words you use, you sound like Synonym.com, ChatGPT wrote it at a university level for you, you're not getting the marks. If you do not answer the question, doesn't matter. And you need to check the task word, because if it asks to what extent and then your thesis doesn't have the word extent in it, goodbye. You did not answer the question, babes. You want to be assertive, so you don't want to sit on the fence or describe different aspects. You want to make sure you have a clear opinion and firmly sit on like the side that you believe on, that you believe in. And then it doesn't mean that you can't have nuance. So you can still use words like despite or like overall, or if you're doing a differentiated essay and then you're saying like, although this event played a part in this, blah, blah, and blah, blah played an even more significant role, you can still use that language, but that's still a judgment. You still, no matter what, you need to be very assertive and be like, this is my opinion. And you're trying, like throughout your essay, your goal is to make them agree with you. So it's your chance to be right. So you want to be assertive. You don't want to say like, oh, it could be true that. What? Make your judgment be very assertive. You want to be simple and you need it to be easily carried through. If you have a really tough thesis and a really long thesis and it's just complicated and dragged out, you need to be referring back to that throughout your whole essay. So why wouldn't you want it to be simplistic? You want it to be one really simple line, really straight to the point judgment, that it's very easy that throughout your whole essay, in your paragraphs, and then later in your conclusion, just quickly refer back to it. Not this like 4-line argument where you're assessing like the importance of all these different things and you can't even get to one point. And then every single time you want to refer back to your thesis and answer the question, you have to refer back to this massive part. Keep it simple and make sure it's very easy to carry through. And you want to be interesting, or unique. So if you really want to get that band 6 and you're really pushing it, you want to set yourself apart by having a bit more of an interesting thesis. But we're going to be talking about how you can connect your argument to your key themes. And to be more interesting or unique, it's more, instead of just saying like, this event was of thorough importance, it's like looking at this event and its consequences or its results of blah 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 blah, like contribute to the significance of this event and whatever. It's like connecting your arguments within your thesis, but we're going to talk about that. Basically, simplicity is key. So the more complicated your thesis is, the harder it is for you to sustain it throughout your essay. So you're losing marks there naturally because it's going to be harder for you to link it back. And if you're not linking it back and keeping that consistent judgment, you're falling on the first criteria point, which is about answering the question consistently. It's also harder for your mark to make sense of it, because if it takes them longer than a few seconds for them to understand it, they're just going to write it off as a bad one. They're just going to be like, this isn't good, rather than spend time to understand. Like, they don't care. They don't owe you that. They've got heaps to mark in that night. Like, it sucks to say, I feel mean saying this, but this is just the reality. These markers are marking tens and tens of papers every single night, like over this period. They're not going to sit and try to understand your thesis and be like, oh, this student tries really hard. Like, it's different when you're at school and your teachers know you. And I know you use like your student numbers, but it's different when it's your teachers and it's personal and they've been teaching you. These are markers from across the state. You guys are all strangers to them. There's no connection at all, and there's no reason for them to go out of their way to try and understand it. It's exactly the same with handwriting. Please, when it comes to modern, this is such a thing. My brother is in year 12 too, and he got marked down for it in his trials because his handwriting is literally like a doctor. But they do not play around with handwriting. They're marking it online and they're not going to sit there and go out of their way to try and understand it. It sucks, but it's just the reality of it. So if you don't have the best handwriting, please do what you can to fix it. I feel like the best way is doing untimed past papers, because a lot of the time the handwriting gets like that under the pressure. But if you do untimed past papers and you take away that pressure from yourself and you really can prioritize the handwriting and then giving it to a family member or to a friend and being like, hey, can you read this all good? Or just making sure that you're handwriting as much as possible in the next 2 weeks rather than typing, just so you can physically practice making it a bit neater. That's going to help as well. But like I said, the harder is for your marker to make sense of it, whether that because of the handwriting or because your thesis just is really complicated. You're just doing yourself an injustice, so it's not worth it. Albert Einstein, he has this quote: if you can't explain something to a child, you don't understand it. So you don't need You don't need the super fancy words and the really complex terminology. Just get straight to the point, keep it simple, and focus on your big themes and ideas that work and for all your paragraphs and don't require a little explanation. You don't want a thesis that only supports one of your paragraphs and then the rest of your paragraphs, like, it doesn't prove it at all and it's actually the complete opposite point, because then your thesis isn't a true reflection of your whole essay. But if you're finding it hard to simplify your theses, then you just need to practice, and we've got some practice work that we can look at on here. So let's look at thesis simplification. So we've got here, to what extent did Detente achieve its objectives? So we can say that it achieved it in the short term, its short-term objective of preventing a nuclear war between the West and the East. However, it failed to achieve long-term global peace and stability as the US and the USSR continued to fight for dominance over the Third World in their fight for global supremacy. Okay, in terms of content, like, there's nothing wrong with that. But this is a thesis statement. You see how complicated that is. First of all, it's way too long. And now what you need to do is discuss both the fight for the Third World in every single paragraph. So that needs to be referred to in every single paragraph, even though most essays would only do that in one paragraph. And it's not drawing out the key ideas. It's bringing in, like, other ideas as well. But some of this information can literally just go in the second or third sentence. I feel like a lot of the time, and even in English, students do this where they try to fit too much into the thesis, but you don't have to. Like, your thesis is just the first line, and your second and third line will then back up that thesis and give in the extra details. But it doesn't have to go into that first line, because if you bring in those details in the first line, every single paragraph has to link back to that now. So you don't want something that's super long like this, because it's going to make it harder for yourself. So the new thesis instead could be something like this. Though through preventing nuclear war, Detente was successful in the short term, it overall failed to achieve its long-term objectives. Now, you might look at this and be like, wait, but it doesn't have, like, that fancy terminology, and it's so short and it's so straight to the point. But that's what's so good about it. You do need something like this that is so straight to the point, that will fit in every paragraph you write about, and that you can support consistently throughout the whole essay. That's the most important thing. So I wanted to show you the difference, because I feel like less is definitely more in modern, and it's definitely more about being assertive, which is here. This is a lot more assertive rather than, like, going kind of both sides. And it acknowledges that difference, but still has that overall judgment at the end, while this is lacking that. It's kind of just proving both sides. It doesn't even say the extent. It doesn't even say the extent. And this one too needs the extent. It needs the extent. It failed to achieve its long-term objectives to a great extent, to a significant extent. It's got the successful here, which is the judgment, but because it is an extent question, it needs that there. Sorry, usually we do these lectures live, and I sit and wait for someone to be like, where's the extent? But you guys are watching this. But hopefully if you're watching this and you were like, wait, it's not answering the question, and we learnt from the task words. Here we've got evaluate the reasons for Stalin's emergence as a leader of the USSR by the late 1920s. Look at this thesis. What's wrong with this? I want you guys to think, and if you're on the chat, you can answer. But don't you think this is a bit long? Like, why is it mentioning every single other thing? There's a lot going on here. So Stalin emerged as the leader of the USSR because his opposition, Kamenev, Ziaev, Bukharin, and in particular Trotsky, underestimated his abilities and thus were unable to effectively counter his manipulative power plays, as they did not perceive him to be a threat. Okay, very true, but, like, did we have to say all of that, all of it, in, like, one thesis? Not necessary. So I want you guys to just have a quick look at that and think to yourselves, and if, I don't know if the chat, like, it depends on these lectures. Sometimes the chat is going off and other times, like, it's really quiet. So it's going to be really awkward if it's quiet, I'm saying this. But if it is going off and we're having a chat in there, which I hope, but we'll see. I'm going to shut my mouth now. But if it is, please type it if you guys are willing. And if you want to have a go, and I can provide you some feedback. We'll do some peer marking. Carrying through your thesis is very, very important, though. It's one thing to have a good thesis, but if you have a killer thesis and you do not link back to that and carry your judgment through the entirety of the essay, you're losing marks. And they're so strict on this. It's exactly the same in English. Can someone make a tally for how many times I mentioned English in this lecture? Clearly she's going to be an English teacher. But if you're not linking back to the question, goodbye. You're not getting that first criteria point, so it's not worth it. So if your thesis only works for one paragraph, like I said, it appears unbalanced, and then you can actually struggle to maintain the same level of just sophistication, but also not be as consistent because your thesis isn't supporting every paragraph. Your thesis needs to fit into every paragraph. Like you should be able to like copy and paste that under each paragraph and start your paragraphs in a very similar fashion, except this way you're linking your thesis to that specific paragraph's argument, and it should work perfectly. And if it doesn't, it's not a good enough thesis. Your first sentence of each paragraph has to be a judgment, so it's related to your thesis. You don't want to split your judgment. And you obviously don't need historians in your topic sentences. You want them to support it and be like forms of detail, but you don't need that in your topic sentence. And you want to link your judgment throughout your paragraphs as well. And then obviously at the end of your judgment. So at a minimum base, like if you guys, you need to be linking back to your thesis, and your thesis is just your judgment of the essay. So I'm going to use them like interhandedly. But your first sentence and your last sentence of every body paragraph has to include your judgment and your thesis. That's like a must. Like it has to say the extent, it has to say whether it was successful, it has to do that at a minimum, at a bare minimum. But even then, you're not answering the question very consistently because you're just kind of like summing it up when you're linking back. You're not like evaluating it very well. While if you bring up a statistic, for example, or a historian quote and then add that, which therefore supports the high extent in which, and you have a couple like little references here or there. It's like in English when you use the keywords of the question in some of your analysis after you put in your quotes and you're analyzing the effects of them. That will get you those marks, and that's how you're going to get into that high band 5, band 6 category. So don't think, I'm only going to answer the question in the intro, because that happens a lot. And it's great to have it in the first in the first sentence and the last, but if you really want to get into those high marks, you need to be referring in each paragraph at least 4 times. So even if you want to do first line, last line, link back to the question, and then 2 times throughout your paragraph, if you want to link like a quote or statistic or like just some general explanation and use that to then connect back to the judgment, perfect. That will help you, because throughout the whole essay, you have over 10 references to the question. That also helps them know that you didn't memorize the essay. It also gets you away from writing like a narrative. And this is why having the thesis, it actually helps you. It actually helps you. It's not just this annoying thing that you have to do. It's very easy if you don't have your thesis and you don't have that judgment to end up just writing a narrative and to not and like reciting your textbook, reciting your notes, rather than actually analyzing or having any argument in your essay. So integrating key themes and issue is the great way to set yourself on the path to writing a band 6 modern history essay. So they're key themes and issues for a reason, and a lot of the time they relate to multiple areas of your syllabus. So common themes are leadership and power, nationalism, imperialism, pragmatism, ideological theory, popular support, differing visions. And you can use these themes in your thesis to then connect. So let's say like 3 of your paragraphs, each one is on nationalism, imperialism, differing visions. You can use that in your thesis as evidence to why it is highly valuable or it was highly important or whatever. You can then use that to back it up. Now, narrative can be defined as a spoken or written account of connected events, real fiction, typically in a chronological structure. And in narrative writing, the purpose is to relate the series of images, events, and actions to your reader. But that's very different to analytical, which to explain how these relate to a broader theme, how they relate to each other, and their short, long-term impact. So narrative writing is really easy in modern. It's such an easy mistake to make. It's probably the most popular mistake that students make. And the only reason for that, it's not your fault, guys, don't worry. But even in class, there's so much content that you have to go through. So I want you guys to think about your modern classes now. A lot of the time, you guys are learning the content, you're reading the textbook, you're going through slides and presentations, which are just teaching you what happened. And you're learning the story of Russia, or the story of the Nazis, or the story of the Treaty of Versailles, or whatever topic you're doing. You're learning the events that happen. You're trying to understand the history of it. But a lot of the time in class, because the content and the syllabus is so extensive, there's not enough time to work on these skills adequately. So in class, and this is definitely a reflection of my experience in Year 12, we just did so much work on what happened and the actual events, and not enough on connecting those or looking deeper into a judgment or arguing those. It was kind of just learning the textbook, and then all my notes and a lot of my study, because I was always writing notes, was just memorizing what happened and the dates and the statistics and the proof. And I'm sure that's a very relatable thing for anyone watching this here. But the issue with that is you're much more likely to fall into narrative writing, which is one of the top feedback points every single year from modern history markers, because students just end up reciting their history, like their history textbook or their history notes in their essay, and they're not actually analyzing the event, the significance of it, the impact, the relationship with other factors, nor answering the question. They'll see like an event, they might see like power struggle, and then they're just going to explain the whole power struggle and what happened, but they're not going to analyze that at all, or say why it was important, or the impact of it, or how it related to other parts of Stalin's rule, or anything. They're just going to purely write about what happened in the power struggle. And it's great that you know that content, but this is what I mean, where if you do not practice these skills, you're limiting yourself, because it's one thing to know the content, and even if you know everything about the power struggle, you will not get that high band 6 mark because you're not arguing it. You actually fall into the band 5, band 4, and lower because you're writing too much of a narrative. So narrative writing is the biggest thing that you want to avoid, and it's still the easiest mistake to make. And that's why we really wanted to focus on skills for you guys, because it's just not focused on enough in class. And I know for me, I felt so confident with the content, but then it wouldn't reflect in my marks, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, I know that I know this. I have so many flashcards. I've like memorized my notes. I know all these dates. Like, why am I not getting the marks? But it was because I would fall into this when I'm writing narratives and I'm not proving anything. I'm just kind of detailing it and describing it all. So it's not enough to just have your judgment in your intro. And this is why I say that the judgment is so important, because the judgment is the one thing that is going to take you from narrative writing to analytical writing. So it's not enough to just have your judgment in the intro, because if you don't have it throughout the whole essay, you're going to fall into narrative writing. And that's why having a judgment to refer back to every single time that you think, oh my gosh, I'm just like reciting history, oh my gosh, I haven't even brought up a question, then you can just quickly go back to the judgment, and that way you bring it back to the analysis and you can still analyze. But historical detail is used to then support your judgment and overall thesis, not to support the event of what happened. You got to remember, these people are history teachers. Like, they know the content. So the content, like you reciting it now, does nothing. And it's not, even if you know these really great deep, like random statistics and really like specific details and these really powerful historian quotes, it means nothing if you're just name dropping them and then describing them, but not like using that to your advantage in an argument. You're actually limiting yourself. So at a minimum, they have to feature in every single argument. So all content needs to be relevant. All content needs to work towards your judgment. And remember, in modern, you don't have to include all the content you've studied. Like in the essays especially, it's going to be on one dot point. But even that one dot point, like one dot point can be like 6+ pages of notes. Like, there's so much to look through in each dot point. So don't think that you need to cover every single thing. Detail is important. But like, you don't need to go overboard. It's like, don't go too much into content that you're not looking at your judgment or your argument enough. So here we've got assess the importance of Lenin to the Bolshevik consolidation of power. So this is what a descriptive paragraph would look at. So like, we've got Lenin, we've got when he was born, who he was, then his role when he died, what he did to Tsar Nicholas, his role in the government, his role in the October Revolution, and then other parts that he played in the new Communist Party. Okay. There's nothing wrong with this. Like, I'm reading this paragraph and I'm like, wow, so much detail, so many dates. Like, slay that you, like, real big slay that you know, like, when he died and, like, when he joined the party and when he did what, like, slay. But, babes, like, the question is to assess the importance of him to the consolidation of power. This is just saying what he did in the consolidation. There's no assessment. There's no Vladimir Lenin was highly important. Like, this is the issue. While, if we had the same question, look at me, guys. I'm giving you guys answers. Screenshot this. If you're doing Russia, you can use this. But look at this. Lenin was of great importance to the Bolshevik consolidation of power, as it was his leadership and ideology that underpinned all Bolshevik action during the period. And now you can link back to leadership and ideology in every paragraph, which works and will suit your whole essay. Very easy to link back to, straight to the point, but still sophisticated. You love to see it. Look at the difference though. When you read this first line, like, first of all, why is it 4 sentences? Second of all, has nothing to do with the question. It's just literally, this is like a biography of Lenin, and that's what ends up happening when you get too much into content. Lenin's influence is clearly exemplified during this, and it's still linking back. It's got here a historical quote, it's got actual details, but you don't need this biographical, birthday, death date, everything. Like, it's fine. It's fine. It's more about the judgment and linking that to the content. But yeah, I just wanted to show you guys this paragraph. I'm just thinking if there's anything else we don't have too much time to go through content in detail, but if you guys are doing rush hour, I know not all of you are, but if you are, you can definitely screenshot this, and this is a good idea just to see how to structure your paragraphs. And I think that reading past exemplars and samples is some of the best thing that you can do for yourself. So if you do want to go read past essays online, I definitely recommend it. Just Google it. There's so many online that you can read, but it's some of the best things that I did for myself. And what I would do, I would see what other students were doing, and I would be like, oh, I really like that they do this. Sometimes I'd be like, oh, I don't like that they've done this, but I'd be like, oh, I like this. And I read another response and be like, oh, I like how they switch up the structure here, or oh, I like their use of terminology, or oh, I liked how they're linking back to their judgment. I would take different things that I liked, and then it helped me make my own style of essay writing that really worked for me, and then helped me improve my marks. So I think being able to see the difference and see, oh no, do you feel like you're falling more into this descriptive response, or are you already really at that detailed level? And even like bringing up a trial paragraph or your trial introduction, compare it to this and be like, okay, where am I falling short? Because this is a band 6 25 out of 25 level extract. So look at it and be like, well, where am I falling short? So judgment in detail is so important. You want to make sure that your judgment is always connecting to the point of your paragraph, through the content, through the evidence, and through the detail, and that everything's interrelated. This is what a good essay looks like. A bad essay looks like this, where like you're going back and forth. Half of it's literally just content, and you're not connecting it back to the judgment. There's literally one connection, and you're not referring to it otherwise. We do not want that. We do not want that. Quick water break, sorry. Your girl is talking for 2 hours straight. I'm used to 1 minute TikToks. Let's talk about how to link back. So the good way to get back into the habit is carrying through the judgment and consistently linking back to it, is using phrases like these. And you can literally memorize these, or even just quickly pop them on a flashcard, so that you can kind of get them into your head. And when you're writing your essay, you're like, oh, I got to bring it back. Just quickly pull out one of these. So blah, 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 that's affirming the significance of the event. That's when I say link back to the your judgment or your thesis, it's not this crazy big thing that you have to do. It's a phrase. It's literally a sentence. The accuracy of the statement is further revealed as, or through blah, it is evident that blah, blah, blah was a highly critical factor. Like, it's not a big deal to link back to it, and it's not going to take you all this time, and you're not going to not be able to finish your essay. Your essay is actually even stronger because you're doing that. So if you can integrate it, you'll be amazed at the difference that it makes. It really helps your marker and helps you stay on track with your argument, but it shows your marker, hey, I haven't forgotten the question. Hey, Fred, you're going to feel happy tonight. Let's look at some thesis work. So let's look at this question. Account for the Bolshevik consolidation of power. Which thesis stands for? Guys, we're starting simple. I know you guys know, but here we've got the Bolsheviks consolidated power in Russia for multiple reasons, or the Bolshevik consolidation of power was a result of the pragmatic application of communist theory. If you say multiple reasons, too broad. Here we've got pragmatic application of communist theory, and then you'd have to show that through the themes or the factors that you're doing. So obviously it's number 2. Yay! Good job, everyone. No, you picked that one. No, you picked that one. So how would you carry this through? You could do paragraph 1. This would be an event or a syllabus essay, like the factor essays that we were looking at. So paragraph 1 could be on early social and political reforms. Paragraph 2 could be on the treaty. Paragraph 3 could be civil war and communism. And paragraph 4 would be the new economic policy. And then in each paragraph, you describe how communist theory was pragmatically utilized to effectively deal with the situation of that paragraph. So that way you're linking that idea and that kind of core theme to each of the factors or the syllabus points that you're going to be writing about in your essay, and everything links, everything's happy, and it's strong. Super fun and fresh. Let's talk about introductions, because they are so important. Like I said, first impression of your marker. So if you have a good start and an average essay, you're still more likely to get a better mark because you're gaslighting them with your good start, because it's fresh in their mind, like, and they start happy, rather than a pretty lame one and then trying to prove yourself. The first sentence of your introduction has to be your judgment. Please don't start with some like take back to 1990 blah. No context, no background info, straight to the point, please. You need your thesis. It needs to be your judgment. And then once you make that judgment, your second sentence can back it up. So don't worry too much, like I said before, about putting in all the details or all these extra dates or all these extra events that then led you to that judgment. That's what your like second sentence can do. But your actual thesis and your genuine judgment should not be anything more than a sentence, so that you can link back to it. And at the end of your paragraph, you're going to link back to your thesis. So think of your intro and your paragraph kind of like a sandwich, where the bread is your judgment Like as a base, at least the bread has to be in the first sentence and the last sentence. So when we're structuring intros, look what you guys have here. This can hopefully help you guys a lot. Thesis is going to be your first sentence, overall judgment. Then in your second sentence, you're going to explain that thesis and clearly, briefly, and outline the context of your thesis and that judgment, why you've reached it, and just kind of like enough detail into like what's brought you to that overall opinion. Third, that third kind of point, so you'd kind of be at around fourth, third, fourth, fifth sentence, you're gonna list what each paragraph is about, and then you want to make it clear what type of essay you're writing, and then you're gonna restate your thesis. So realistically, this shouldn't be like 6 sentences max, but even then, like try to hit 5 to 6. That's more than enough for your intro. It shouldn't be more than half a page, 3/4 if you have big writing. But like if your intro is 1 page, you know, once I got marked down for that because mine was 1 page because I just put too much in there. It's just not necessary. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just be super straight to the point. Leave all the information for the actual paragraph. So I know, like, looking at that, like, I feel like it's one thing to look at that, but best believe we're going to go through it together and like actually put that into action. So let's look at how successful was Soviet foreign policy in achieving its aims from 1970 to 1941. If you're doing, like, if you guys get a foreign policy question, I'm so sorry. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. I'm sorry. There is a lot of things I will choose to do than ever write about foreign policy. I don't care. For me, when I was in year 12, I don't know if you guys are the same, but like, the things that I would do, I would pick any question but foreign policy. You could ask me any other dot point and I'd pick it other than foreign policy. I can't. I'm still traumatized. But I wanted to put this in here so you guys can see. So this is what a really straight to the point band 625 out of 25 Soviet foreign policy intro looks like, but let's go through it together. Number 1, Soviet foreign policy was only partially successful in achieving its aims from 1917 to 1941. Now, I will admit this thesis is very, very simple. It could be even better if it brought in some of the themes or some of the factors and had like a general overarching idea. But because Soviet foreign policy is so difficult, and you guys know that it's one of the harder, if not the hardest dot point, you can kind of get away from it here. But here, see, we've got the judgment. Partially successful. So it's asking how successful. We're being very specific and we're saying it's only partially, and there's that sense of judgment. Then after your thesis, this is the explanation. And this is where, okay, maybe the thesis is short. All the proper ideas are coming in here. So it's fine if you have a really simple thesis if you can back it up in the rest of it. So we've got Soviet foreign policy had fundamentally incompatible aims, domestic stability and international revolution, which greatly limited its accomplishments as a success of one aim reduced opportunity for the other. Look at that. That just backs up that judgment now. So your second sentence is going to back up that judgment. It's going to expand on it and then explain how you came to it. Though the aims and purposes of Soviet foreign policy fluctuated depending upon the current leadership and ideology of the Bolshevik Party, preservationist policies demonstrate that throughout the period, the Bolsheviks' aim of survival outweighed their desire to spread socialism. So it's literally just explaining your thesis. So you know how before we were looking at some of those theses and they were really good, but they were just super long? They don't have to be long because this can be long. Your explanation is where you can drag it out. This just has to be really straight to the point. Then you're going to outline. This is evident through the various militaristic, strategic, economic, diplomatic, and social cultural factors that impacted or were impacted by the Soviet foreign policy during the period. So here we've got paragraph 1, paragraph 2, economic, paragraph 3, diplomatic, and paragraph 4, social cultural. And that's how you can it's kind of like in your English essays, how like you have the themes and like each of your themes are going to be. This is really bad. This is really bad. I hope you guys are happy you sign up for a modern and English lecture. But it's the same thing where you kind of outline what your themes are and you're going to say that, and that lets your marker know the outline of your essay. And then you're going to restate your thesis, which demonstrates the Bolsheviks' internal conflict between pragmatism and ideological adherence that contributed to its only partial success. One thing I want you guys to see, this is a thesis restated, but see how it uses the same word. And I remember saying that early in the lecture. Don't mix up the words. And I know it can be really like enticing to just be like, you know what, like I've already used significant, I've already used high, I've already used partial. Let me just use synonyms and I'll mix up my judgment so my marker can see I'm using more terminology. No, just use the same word. If you say like highly significant, just keep saying highly significant. If you say profound, say profound. If you say extensive, say extensive. If you say partial. Like that's the word that you're going to use throughout. Don't mix it up because it's just going to confuse your marker. And if you are repetitive with it, then your marker is going to say, hey, they're sticking to their judgment. hey, they're answering the question, and we want that because that's what's going to get you to that top band 6, the first criteria point. Now let's look at structuring paragraphs. First, you're going to have one sentence, which is your judgment. That's going to all be in one, upon the relationship of your thesis to the focus of your paragraph. So this is where you bring your judgment from your paragraph to your thesis. So if we looked at this paragraph here, Soviet policy was only partially successful in achieving its aims. We've got partially successful, so that's a judgment. And the first paragraph was on the militaristic or strategic. So you'd link, like you could say Soviet foreign policy was only partially successful in achieving its aim from 1917 to 1941 due to militaristic and strategic factors such as evident through the militaristic and strategic factors or failures of. And then that's where you link your paragraph and the idea and the point, factor, syllabus, dot point, whatever theme of your paragraph to this judgment. The judgment is that it was partially successful. This is our paragraph. Then you're going to explain that judgment in 1 to 2 sentences. Honestly, it's literally teal. It's literally teal or peel. This is where you outline your argument for that particular paragraph. You want to be really simple and clear, and just kind of like drag it out a bit. Further explanation with examples. This is all your explanation, and this is where you're going to put in historian quotes and statistics and details and laws and dates and all of that, and you want to be very specific with those. And then you're going to link back to judgment. It's literally a GIL. It's a GIL. You give your judgment, you explain that judgment, you give examples of the judgment, and then you link back to the, okay, we've created GIL, guys. We're going to do GIL from now on. So let's try it with this question for the failures of Detente. So the judgment is the policy of Detente failed in achieving an improvement of the militaristic landscape of the superpowers due to the continuance of the arms race. So clearly the judgment is that it failed. And then here's the thesis. And then they're linking that same thesis of its failure to the continuance of the arms race, which is what this paragraph is about. Then it's explaining this judgment, going into some detail. The biggest part is further explanation, is where they're bringing in more detail and some quotes. And then finally, they're linking back to the judgment. Therefore, the policy of Detente had failed in achieving an improvement of the militaristic landscape of the Cold War, thus contributing to Detente's overall failure. So hopefully you guys can see there that that's connecting it back to the thesis there. And even if we look through the paragraph, you've got here, thus, therefore, it is clear, and it's linking back to that thesis. So those connecting words are the phrases and the starters that you can use to come back to the question, so that you're referring to it not only in the first judgment, not only in your link, but also throughout the paragraph. That's very, very important. If you guys are studying this, you can have a screenshot, or again, if you've downloaded the slides, they will be there. Now, when it comes to the conclusion, we've got to what extent was Lenin a critical factor of the Bolshevik consolidation of power? Here's one. So therefore, though the significant contributions made by Lenin in regards to the implementation of his early social political reforms, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, the Civil War and the War Communism, and the new economic policy, it is evident Lenin played a highly significant role within the period. We've got the judgment. We've got the judgment again. But I want to take you guys through this, because here you're actually writing your intro backwards, where you're going to start with the outline of your essay. So the outline of your essay is what each of your paragraphs were structured from. So clearly here, one paragraph was on early social and political reforms. The next paragraph was on the treaty. The next one was on civil war and war communism. And the final one was on new economic policy. So you're actually going to start by listing what the theme, factor, or syllabus dot point that you were talking about in each paragraph was. You list those, and then you link that to your thesis. So you're outlining, okay, therefore through blah, 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 and these events or these themes, it is clear that, it is evident that, and then you have your judgment, highly significant role within the period. And then you're going to explain it just really quickly, literally one sentence. Babes, we don't have the time. We're going to get moving to the next section. Lenin, as the primary leader of the Bolshevik Party, underpinned through his leadership and ideology all actions and activity of the Bolshevik Party, exerting more influence than any other leader at the time, which then again supports that highly significant role. And then again, once again, restate your thesis. Thus, Lenin was a highly critical factor to the Bolshevik consolidation of power. 93 words. Guys, this is literally 3 sentences. This is 3 really good sentences straight to the point, which is why it's so worth still having a conclusion, even if it's really short. 3 to 4 sentences. Like, if it's any more than 5, why? Like, this is seriously all it has to be, and this is still at a band 6 level. So straight to the point. Please don't waste your time. It's so big on the thesis, and I hope that you can see the trend between all of these. The trend is that every single first line and last line is literally just the thesis again. It's literally just the thesis and the judgment repeated, your thesis and judgment. What's the connection? Your judgment is in your thesis. So they're the same thing. Now, the final part of this lecture that I'm going to look at is differentiated essays, which, listen, I don't want you guys to get it unless I've actually met some students at lectures who feel like at some of our in-person lectures who actually feel really confident with differentiated essays, which is really good. But differentiated essays are definitely a struggle. So differentiated essays are when you get questions like, to what extent is the new economic policy the most important factor in blah blah, and like, to what extent, oh, here I'm making up one, it's literally on the screen. To what extent was the new economic policy the most critical factor in the Bolshevik consolidation of power? To what extent was the Treaty of Versailles the most critical factor in the collapse of the Weimar Republic? So here is when they allow you to discuss other significant factors or issues other than the STEM. So you could have gotten to what extent was the new economic policy, and you could have said the extent the new economic policy was the most critical factor to a high extent. However, other factors such as civil war communism, and the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk also played a critical role in this. And that's where you bring in other topics as well. If you really just wanted to say, like, in terms of differentiated essay, you don't even need to do that. If you have enough information on purely new economic policy and you can write 3 paragraphs and like look at different like factors within that, you'll find you don't even need to do a differentiated essay. But if you, differentiated essays are good when you don't know the content in really great detail and you know like a summary of like the most of the syllabus. But like some students now, if I said like, oh, can you write a whole essay on new economic policy, I know that there's people watching this now that are like, bro, no way. And that's completely fine. And in this case, this is where you could have another paragraph on like early social and political reforms, maybe a paragraph on war communism, and then one paragraph on new economic policy. So differentiated essays actually open up that space for students and give you that kind of like back window where if you don't know the content too well, there's always something to lean back on. But they do allow you to discuss other factors, but it is very easy to make mistakes in them because the question, your other paragraphs aren't mentioned in the question, so you do have to be very specific. So number one, and one of the easiest essay mistakes to make, is to not consistently reference the STEM factor. So you could argue that the new economic policy was the least critical factor, and instead war communism and the social and political reforms were more important. But if you're arguing that, it's very easy to stop talking about the new economic policy and you'd actually lose marks. There's nothing wrong with your judgment, but it's not answering the question because it's asking you about the new economic policy. So it's fine if you do talk about other factors, but in the end, the STEM factor is the event or the topic that they're asking you about in that point. So you can bring up other factors, but you have to keep linking back to new economic policy. So if you're saying that war communism and the civil war were more contributed more to the Bolshevik consolidation of power, anytime and in those paragraphs when you're writing about that, when you're linking back, you have to say, this therefore shows how war communism played a greater role than the new economic policy. You have to still link back to it even though you're talking about other ideas. And this is where students a lot of the time can make mistakes. Another common mistake is sitting on the fence because different factors have different impacts. So sometimes it's easy to not be able to like make an overall judgment and still like on the overall impact and be like, oh, all 3 of them played a role. And that might be true, but you still need a judgment to say, well, maybe one was more important than the other, or this one was the most important. These came like right behind it, or like this wasn't important at all because these ones were more important. You can't sit on the fence with this. It's fine to recognize that different factors have different impacts, but you do have to give a judgment of what those impacts are. And then failing to link all the factors is the number one thing that you can do and make a mistake in with differentiated essays. It's not like this really, really massive screw up, but if you don't find the link, you're not going to get that really high band 6 mark, and you're like failing to link there because you're not showing similarities or a general theme. You're just kind of separating all the topics. But the fact that it's a differentiated essay, it's connecting all of those ideas together. So that's like if you're talking about war communism and the reforms, but you're not linking back to new economic policy and you're not linking those factors together and how they all interrelate, then you're not answering the question either. So that goes back to not answering the question, which is, like I said, number one mistake you can make. So to overcome this, consistently address the question. I don't care if you are not, like if you, like let's say you're doing that new economic policy question, but you're saying new economic policy was the least important. It doesn't matter if your whole other essay is on how important the other factors are, no matter what, whatever STEM factor is in the question, so in that question it was new economic policy, or in this question it was Treaty of Versailles, I think, yep, that has to be your first paragraph. Even if you're saying that it wasn't important and that like you're leaning towards the other side of the fence, you have to write about whatever the STEM factor, so whatever topic or dot point that they've asked about has to be your first paragraph. And I made this mistake in my internal for Russia because I disagreed with the question and I used other factors. So I brought in the factor of the question last because I'm like, bro, I'm going to obviously write about the ones that were more important and had more of an impact and then use that as evidence to why this one was important. It's actually the opposite. If new economic policy is in the question, if power struggles, whatever's in the question, if economic factors or political, whatever dot point is in the question needs to be your first paragraph's theme and what you're going to speak about in the first paragraph. But even when you are focusing on the other factors in your other paragraphs, in the beginning and the end of your paragraphs, you have to link back to it and back to that STEM factor. So here, like the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, the new economic policy was highly critical to the Bolshevik conservative power through its pragmatic application of ideology. And that way, it's connecting the two paragraphs and it's still got that STEM factor even though this paragraph's on this idea. Or here, the Treaty of Versailles was critical in amplifying the social, political, and economic issues of the Weimar Republic, thus greatly contributing to its eventual collapse. Linking together. So you need to still reference back that STEM factor. See how Treaty of Versailles was what was in the question, so was new economic policy. So even though it's separate paragraphs and it's not about those ideas, it's still linking back to that STEM factor. So whatever question and whatever topic is in that question has to be in every paragraph. You still have to link to it. One paragraph will purely be on this idea. The other paragraphs have to link back to that, whether it's affirming that or it's going against it. Making clear judgments is so important as well. So you don't want to sit on the fence or present conflicting arguments. You want to make sure that your overall judgment at least supports one like factor in like different capacities. And it can be really simple. So here we've got the implementation of Lenin's social and political reforms was a highly critical factor within the Bolsheviks' consolidation, but it was not the most important factor as others played a similarly critical factor. Great. Slay. Or you can even make it a little bit more sophisticated and be the implementation of Lenin's social and political reforms was a highly critical factor within the Bolshevik consolidation of power, demonstrating the significance of popular support in maintaining control. This way it's a little bit more sophisticated, but again, it still has that judgment and you're not leaning towards or just like sitting on the fence. So here we've got a differentiated introduction. So the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was a highly critical factor within the Bolshevik consolidation of power. However, the importance of the treaty must be considered as just one in a series of critical factors, all of which were undercut by two central aims: maintain popular support, blah, blah, blah. And then here we've got the outline of the essay where it talks about the other factors from that part of the dot point. So early social and political reforms, civil war and war communism, and new economic policy, all of which demonstrate the interrelated importance between all factors contributing to consolidation. So you don't even necessarily have to say that like one was more important than the other. You can just say that like, yes, they're important, but the others like play a role as well, and that they're all like, it still can be highly critical, but that it's not underpinned just by this one event. There's other events as well. So in this, if you were to write a differentiated intro, you'd still have your thesis where you're looking at that STEM factor, but then you do want to have that element of differentiation, which is where you're bringing up other points. Then you're going to explain what that is, outline what's in your essay, so have the other paragraphs, and then restate your thesis, interrelated importance, and it has that it's highly critical. So that brings us to the end of the lecture. I really am claiming band sixes for all of you guys. I know that it was skills, and I'm sorry if some of you were hoping to get some content out of this. I really did want to go through content, but like I said, if you are looking for the core, I'm going through all of the core in the Year 12 Head Start, which you guys can watch and download the slides for. And in terms of all the other content, there's so many options for the other three topics that it's just not fair to look at one instead of the other, nor is it possible to do that in 2 hours and go through as much content as I wish I could. But it means a lot that you guys came in your school holidays preparing for HSC to come watch this. So I really do wish you guys all the best. Like I said, I am running the 8 Notes HSC TikTok. So if you guys want any videos or you have any like general like study questions or content questions or anything like that, please literally just comment it on there. I'm happy to make like 1-minute videos quickly going through a skill, or if there is one part from this essay or you want like a sample essay uploaded I'll jump on it. I'll jump on it. So if you guys are looking for any content, please let me know, because there's 2 weeks until the exam, and I'm more than happy to get some stuff up for you guys. But all the best with your exams. I know you guys will smash it. My main advice is to please just do past questions. Trust me, like I hated it as well. But don't even, like I said, push yourself to do a whole 3 hour past paper. Just do one section. You can have your music on in the background. Don't even do it like do open book, have it untimed. That's still practicing the skill. I just hope that this lecture showed you that there's so much skill that goes into the exam, and you can know all that content, but it's the skill that's going to bring you up to that band 6. So manifesting it for all of you. All the best with your exams. I know you guys are going to pull band 6s. I trust it. But I really wish you the best, and I'm very proud of you guys for getting all the way to the end of year 12. It's so, so exciting. I know a lot of teachers and people speak really low and badly about uni, and how uni is a lot worse than high school. But for me, it's been the absolute opposite. I love uni. Uni is a slay, and it's really exciting finishing. And you guys are going to have the best break now, when you finish your last HSC exam and you hear pens down. The next couple of months are going to be so nice, so chill. And you guys deserve it so much. So all the best. Thanks for watching. And yeah, band 6 are coming your way. I know Ness is going to text you that band 6. Bye guys. Thank you.